the removal process, we had to take down this bracket, at which point the connection angles for it were not reusable, so we had to fabricate new on that. And I mentioned to a couple of you guys that with a lot of this meeting new to old construction, we did a lot of field fabrication. A lot of the existing rivets that were in this structure are on very approximate spacing. It's not something where I can take a typical spacing to a fabricator and say, hey, I need you to make these holes on a uniform spacing, because then if we get out and one of those is off by 1/4 of an inch, we can't make the connection. So in order to guard against that, we had a lot of blank material that came out. We put it up, we marked it, we drilled it in the field. So these were some of the considerations that had to be taken into account as we went through this process. I would say that the direct project considerations are, as soon as you see that delegated design, it's on us, the contractor, to design the temporary structure as a means of completing what's shown in the contract documents. We don't do that in-house. That's where we bring an outside SE on board to help us out with this. Then also you have to consider that once you've developed this temporary structure, you have to bring on a fabricator, a steel erector, and there's time and material costs with each step of that process. I talked a little bit about project phasing and schedule. Keep in mind that you can only do 2 of these locations at a time. It's a really time-intensive process to kind of leapfrog that, and at each location, then you have to erect the shoring structure, take down the columns, demo foundations. We also had drilled micropiles that were even below the foundations that are shown on your cut sheet. Then it was pouring the pile caps, installing new columns. Then we could take down the temporary structure and move it to the next location. Site access restrictions, as mentioned, that completely blocked the ability to travel through the site. So we had to map that out and how we were going to gain access to certain areas depending on where we were short at. Cost management, and I would tack onto that cost efficiency. When involving the SE, we had him look at it in a way where we had a lot of reusable pieces. So we were able to take down a structure at one location, and it might not be entirely reusable, but if we could reuse 90% of that, then we're that much further ahead, or at least we save on having to refabricate some of those pieces. Some of the indirect impacts to the project, and this goes back to the plan sheet that I've given you with the highlighted vaulted areas. You now have taken the track load off of permanent foundations at one location. You've now put the entire track load onto temporary foundations in an entirely different location. To go along with the voids in the street, also delegated as a part of this project was the earth retention system that allowed for the placement of the new foundations and removal of the old foundations. So each of those had to be reviewed under the surcharge applied by putting the tracks on temporary structure. So there was a specialized engineer that we dealt with. It wasn't the same one that did the shoring design, but he specialized in vault analysis of subgrade structures. So he did a lot of review for us on this project and verifying that those structures were able to take the surcharge load. We actually did not run into a situation on this job where we had to then shore the interior of the vault. So it was reviewed, determined that those were adequate based on the new load points. Structural monitoring, again, with this being a temporary structure, it's critical to ensure that it behaves in the exact same way that a permanent structure would be, because it is every bit as critical. It has to take on the same loads that the columns that were there as part of a permanent construction would have. So as a guard, to make sure that we didn't deal with settlement issues or anything starting to slip, we had to put structural monitoring tags on all of these and monitor daily, make sure that that structure was not moving on us. Neighborhood impacts, traffic management. There was no way to complete this without an extended duration, full closure of Wabash Avenue. So I know that the property owners that were adjacent to that were not the biggest fans of ours while we were there. We did have Wabash Avenue closed for about 2 years while we completed this project. It was opened up again in March of this year. Pedestrian management, also going back to one of the early pictures shown here, you can see how close the adjacent buildings are. If you kind of transfer that down to the sidewalks, the general public is right on top of you as well. So that was something that we had to deal with on a daily basis. And that group that presented on safety talked about flagging. We had a ton of flagging hours on this project just to try to manage the people that are moving around us. We also had to do structural monitoring of those properties that were adjacent to us. And that was dealing more so with the micropiles that we were drilling because we were going so deep. We did also do routine monitoring of the foundation walls of those structures that were nearby. Operational noise, this one is down on the list because most of the time it was disregarded. I know that the neighborhood would have loved for us to hurry up and do it without noise, but not all of that is possible. Operational impact, we did have an extended duration slow zone on that side of the loop. That's actually still in effect as we finish up the punch list on this job. We still have flagmen posted there for adjacent on, adjacent to, or visible from the right-of-way. Basically anything that CTA operators are able to see, they want to make sure that there's a flagger up there signaling to those people that it's safe to pass through the station. Again, as with Mike's job, the time restrictions are limited to non-rush periods when we have to do that type of work. This was completed without operational disruption during weekday service. The other reason why I say that, if you want to flip to the next slide, there were some conditions that we did not vet out ahead of time, stuff that was unknown to us until we got up there and discovered it. One of those being that some of these vent girders that are shown on your cut sheet and we've looked at some point along the line, whether it be at the original construction or after, were actually assembled in 2 pieces. Until we got up on top, there was no way to see that there was actually a splice condition there, which changed that condition entirely. Before we were able to proceed with the fully designed shoring structure, we had to do a sort of supplemental shoring, go up there, turn off the electrified third rail, and replace structural steel so that we knew that it was adequate to support then under the shore condition. Also, something we ran into was discovered unknown utility. That was every place where we put a bucket in the ground to excavate for these new foundations. We found stuff that was not where it was supposed to be, unlisted, unknown. I think that every single foundation on this job was redesigned around discovered utilities. So once you run into these issues, then as project managers or on the side of the general contractor, we're then looking how to mitigate impacts to the schedule, how to mitigate impacts cost-wise. A lot of these, since they were unknown, not included in the contract documents, then do go back to the owner, but still as part of providing service to the owner, you try to come up with the most cost-effective way to be a problem solver and help be part of the solution. Sometimes those two don't always work together. There was a lot of material that had to be accelerated on this job, which then you have cost impacts and to try to maintain the schedule and things of that nature. And then I just wanted to put up a picture of kind of the finished product of what we were looking at. This is back in March. That's when we reopened the roadway to the public for the first time in 2 years. And as I had mentioned earlier, any of the gray steel, that was the steel that was replaced. This one is just a week or two ago. You can see that all the fencing, the barrier wall has been removed. We still have a type 3 barricade up there, but as soon as that barricade was pulled out, we gave the street back in its permanent condition to the city to allow free flow of traffic down Wabash Avenue. And then I wanted to end it with the side-by-side pictures of day and night of the new station. This station actually just opened to the public on August 31st of this year, so this is brand new, but it's something we're really proud of. It's there's nothing else like it on in the CTA system. So it's hopefully something that's going to be there for the next 100 years, just as the stations before it were there for 100 years. And it's something that's neat to have been a part of. So, any questions?
So we have one more piece. Oh, what we're going to do is, instead of break up, we were just going to really quickly run through it.
We do have some streets that need to leave.
At 3:20?
Yeah.
We can stop. I mean, to be honest, we weren't going to have enough, and we realize now we had way more than we needed. So we'll stop there. For my side, so since I do recruiting for Passion, I did want to note, I am here tomorrow doing interviews. I saw Brandon's note that said, go and network, don't shop for internships. So I know you're not supposed to be looking for new internships, but if you're interested in hearing more about Passion, or even kind of having that first conversation about like transition to full-time and what that would be like, or what our project engineers do, our different offices or responsibilities, I am here all day tomorrow. So you can stop by in the morning and we can talk availability, and my morning looks pretty packed, but yeah, you can stop by. I'll be in, 1259D.
1259, yep.
Or if you have a second after class and you do want to talk about maybe scheduling something or grabbing my card or whatever, feel free.
And I do highly encourage that. I mean, like she put the caveat in there, but I do. It's a great opportunity. They're here on campus, network, talk to them if you're at all interested, and it's a good way for you to start getting better at talking about yourself in front.
Yeah, I'll practice with you guys.
Yeah.
And then also, we'll be at the BCM Fair. These guys won't be there, but I'll be there, as well as Mike Prindle. I don't know, maybe he was a senior.
Yeah.
So you might not know, but another CEF alum. Both he and myself were traders to our intern companies between Passion after graduation. So we can talk about that too. I know you're not supposed to, but UH. So yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. And a couple of things that you got to get done by the end of the week. Discussion forum, post your notes from today. I want to see what you kind of thought processes you all have. Yeah. Sorry, surprise. And then I think you've also got your portfolio that needs to be done next week. Miss anything? All right. You guys are free. Good job. What?
I'll write them down now. Not to worry about it.
Oh, what's up, dude? Are you Matthew? Yes. We're supposed to partner up with
Yes.
I
Would you send me the copy because Brandon wants to sell them? I have my portfolio right there, just email it to you. Where you guys going? Did you email? Yeah, email. I've got Tim, I don't think anyone's gonna care how many U-bolts we've had installed. That's company secrets. How many pipes we got laid out?
I was going through, yeah. I was in there, looking for like, those here. And I saw this one in there. For like, for housing and stuff like that.
Oh, so we get paid $700 like 2 months ago.
No, not in total. It's like, basically, it's a vendor name. So, people like, the vendor place. Request for travel.
Do you make your own Excel sheet or do you? I think it's fine as long as you.
That's- No, we don't. We don't do other hours. I think
Afterwards, but the unions are the only
No, we have no